Many years ago, when our oldest children were all small, this is a favorite story that they like to hear, and it's told over and over again. It's a story about George Washington Rabbit. One day, George Washington Rabbit went to see his granny, and every day when he went to see his granny would have something real nice for him to take home to his mammy. So this one day he went, and she just baked a big angel food cake. And she gave him a big piece to take home. It was so big it was almost half the cake. He scrunched that cake up in his hands and carried it home. And when he got home, it was all scrunched up and not even fit to be eaten. His mammy said, "What you got there, George Washington Rabbit?" And he said, "Cake, Mammy, cake." He said, "George Washington Rabbit, a day-old kitten that have more sense than you have. The way to bring cake home from Granny's is to put the cake in your hat and put the hat on your head and come along home." "All right, Mammy," said George Washington Rabbit. So the next day when he went to Granny's house, his Granny was churning butter. And oh, how he liked the taste of that fresh buttermilk. And his bare feet went pitty-patty across the kitchen floor as he got a glass and he drank the milk, the buttermilk. And then his Granny gave him a pound of unsalted butter to take home to his mammy. So George Washington Rabbit, he remembered what his mammy said. He put the butter in his hat, put the hat on his head, and went along home. But he had to go through this big old cotton field. The sun was hot, and it shone down on his hat, and it melted the butter, and the butter ran all down over his face. By the time he got home, he was in a terrible mess. His mammy said, "George Washington Rabbit, what have you got there?" And he said, "Butter, Mammy, butter." "George Washington Rabbit, don't you have any sense at all? A day-old kitten would know better than that. The way to bring butter home from Granny's is to take the butter down and dip it in the creek in the cold water and wrap it with some leaves and put it on your hat and then hurry on home." "All right, Mammy," said George Washington Rabbit. And so the next day when he went to his Granny's house, his Granny had a little puppy dog to give him. George Washington Rabbit remembered what his mammy said. He went down to the creek and he dumped the little dog into the cold water and wrapped it in cold leaves and put the dog in his hat. He got home, that poor little dog was just a shivering and a shaking, yes sirree. He almost killed it. His mammy said, "George Washington Rabbit, what you got there?" "Puppy dog, Mammy, a puppy dog." Said George Washington Rabbit, "You don't have any sense at all. Don't you know the way to bring a little puppy home from Granny's is to tie a string around its neck and come along leading it slowly along the road?" "All right, Mammy," said George Washington Rabbit. So the next day he went again to his Granny's house. And his Granny had a nice, great big loaf of fresh bread that she just baked. And he gave him a loaf to take home to his mammy. He remembered what his mammy said. So he tied a string around the middle of that loaf of bread, and he went dragging it home through the dirt real slowly. When he got home, that bread wasn't even fit to be eaten, no siree. And his mammy said, "George Washington Rabbit, what do you got there?" "It's bread, Mammy, bread." "George Washington Rabbit, you're not ever going to have any sense. Tomorrow I'm going to go to Granny's, and you're going to stay home." So early the next morning, his mammy got up, and she baked 2 great big cherry pies. Grandma says they're apple, but they were really cherry. And she put them up to cool on the windowsill. She put her shawl around her shoulders and started off for Granny's house. And she looked around, and George Washington Rabbit was looking at those 2 cherry pies like he wanted to eat them. So his mammy turned and she shook her finger really good at him. She said, "Now, George Washington Rabbit, you mind how you step in those pies." So as soon as his mammy was gone, George Washington got up and he stepped. Oh, he just stepped so very, very carefully right in the middle of each one of those pies. And when his mammy got home and saw those pies, why, Nobody ever told what happened to George Washington Rabbit. But you know, don't you?